Hi, Michael.
Hey, Gail, how are you?
Look, how are you?
Good. I just made you a co-host. So if you wouldn't mind, like if people show up while we're
let 'em in.
talking.
Let 'em
Yeah,
in?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a busy day.
Yeah. No other responsibilities with co-host though, right?
No,
Okay.
I'm still learning what the settings are when you're running a town meeting. Because they're like what gets set up. So I can do it while we're starting, but once I start the
Just like
meeting.
Graham, man. You don't have to start recording though until we actually open the meeting.
That's true. But we might forget. Hi,
Hi,
Zoe.
Zoe.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah.
Hey, Graham.
Hello, all.
How you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Enjoying my crocuses. They no longer shudder in the cold. They can open nicely into the sunshine. Very much
Yeah.
appreciated.
The weather was beautiful today, wasn't it?
It was. The frogs in the pond are going ape.
Yeah.
We just had our second set of triplet baby goats born yesterday.
How exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have to hand deliver them?
Well, with this birth yesterday, the first baby was backwards. And
Right.
so I had to reach inside up to my elbow and pull him out.
Yeah.
It was a crazy experience.
Was
But-
that on YouTube that you worked out how to do that?
Oh my goodness. YouTube cannot teach these things.
Was this your first time with this adventure?
We've had a lot of rounds of goat birth, but this is the first time I've had to intervene like that.
We were visiting a few years ago, good friends of ours in Whately who have goats and sheep and I don't know, a couple other things. And we just happened to be there when one of the goats was giving birth. And I ended up filming it, and it was taking a little while. And so like the baby's like half out. It's just a wild thing to watch.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's so incredible. And sometimes they're like fully out, but still in like the birth sac. And it's just like this transition between inside and outside. And it's amazing. It's really, yeah, I'm glad you got to see that. Yeah. But they're all healthy. They're all good.
that's good. Yeah, it's
Oh, good.
amazing how they stand up. I've seen like cows be born. That's just like amazing. You know, they're out and they're up.
Giraffes.
We're
Giraffes.
not, we're not. so impressed.
Hey Nate, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How's
Good.
everyone?
Hey, Nate.
Did you assist any births this week?
Not this week. No, I didn't. But I do have a new nephew who just appeared last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Were you part of that appearance?
I was not, but I was texting back and forth at about 2:45 a.m. And yeah, just elated. Really, really happy for my brother.
Oh,
So
that's great. Congrats.
Yeah.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Gail. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Hey,
Leslie.
Hi, just getting set up here.
Nate, is your nephew very far away, your brother?
he's an ER doc in Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
So like we all grew up in Massachusetts, but yeah, he's a little bit a ways, yeah.
Mm.
But hopefully we'll be able to see the little one soon.
That's very cool. So why don't we give Miriam a minute or two and then we can,
Michael, are you expecting Miriam to come tonight?
I assume she was. I didn't hear anything. I didn't get any text that she was not. So I know she's got a busy life these days, so.
Yeah,
um,
really.
But we'll give her a second and then we can jump in. I'll wait till Leslie to settle in. How's that?
Thank you. I'm one of these people that doesn't need any settling. I'm ready, always ready to go.
Okay.
Oh, pass that skill along, please.
Cool. Well,
It's nice to settle in now.
well, why don't I kick us off and I'll call us to order at 7:03. So the first fun topic, oh, who just disappeared?
We just lost Zoe.
Who did? Well, that's okay because Zoe took minutes last time. So I was going to say we should figure out who's going to take minutes this time and then do it. So, oh, Rita's here. Yay. Cool. And hopefully Zoe will come back.
There's a select board meeting tonight, so Rita's here instead.
I was just at theirs. I'm surprised. I thought they had a,
They got a,
We finished.
wow,
wow.
that's efficient.
I thought you had
That's
executive.
off.
That's my middle name.
Efficient.
Yeah.
Efficient, energy efficient, all kinds of efficient.
Raf, Rita, efficient Farrell.
There's Zoe. Cool. Well, Rita, I'm so glad you came.
Yes.
We were doing the most important part because we don't have a Linda. So we were just figuring out who was going to take minutes this meeting.
Oh, boy.
And then we can pass it over to you for public comments. But
Okay.
since Zoe did such a great job, I think I proposed last time we would just rotate it. So not everyone, would share the pain. So, and I'm going to exempt myself just because I'm running the meeting, which
Oh,
is
yeah,
easier.
because you can.
I know. So, but does anyone want to volunteer to take the minutes? Zoe can tell you how to do it because she's a pro now.
I've got to review the next contract on the MLP. So I've got a lot of pages that I have to check. So I'd rather not.
So you'll do it the next meeting, right, Graham?
I would be willing to do the next meeting. Yeah. My taxes and the MLP will have a contract by then.
Cool. That sounds good. Gail, Nate, Leslie, what do you think?
Not me. I'm on an iPad, so just going back and forth with all the stuff with co-op power and community solar will be plenty for me this time around. Can we get Linda in another time, or are we
No,
too
we don't
new?
have a Linda.
Okay.
Only the
Good
select
luck.
board gets Linda.
Okay.
So, right.
Okay, I'll do it since Nate's hand's up in the air.
He was going to
It's all right.
volunteer you, Gail.
You can
I'm
thumb
happy to
wrestle
do
for
it
it.
this time. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Nate. Really, I do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Me
And,
too. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And if you have questions, I can definitely help. So having done that, we can move into public comments, which I think Rita is the public in terms of this committee. So for people who don't know Rita, she's the chair of the select board and was the mastermind behind creating this committee. So I was really thrilled that we could, since we couldn't get her last time, so Rita, you have the floor.
Okay, well, I'm not going to take a long time since I haven't eaten dinner yet. But first of all, I want to thank all of you for volunteering for this committee. And Michael said I was the mastermind, but really, Eric Stocker kind of planted the idea in my head. So I have to give him
Good.
credit. And, Eric kept saying, I think when he was running for select board, gee, we've had an energy committee in the past, and we had some really good things happening around green communities and getting some municipal solar installations. But at a time when the climate crisis is fever pitch, and here we are, with so much going on in the community, we don't have any real presence around energy issues and climate action. Not that there weren't a lot of opinions out there and a lot of discussion, you're all well aware of that, but that we as a town had no kind of leadership around it. So I took a look. I do some consulting work for the town of Amherst, so I'm routinely kind of on the town's website, and I took a look at their Energy and Climate Action Committee information, and I thought, if Amherst can do it, why can't we? Obviously, with a very different scale, but all the issues that are the same, and there's some issues that are very specific to our community. So that was sort of the impetus for me, kind of starting with Eric, then looking at what in particular Amherst was doing, and then kind of bringing it forth to the select board, which there was like overwhelming support for it. And while it did take us a little while to assemble this committee, I think it's a fabulous, it's a fabulous group of people. Really come at this from different directions, and I think a lot can be done. I think from very little things like thinking about electric charging stations in town and kind of what we do vis-a-vis town vehicles, and when we buy town vehicles, that this committee is in the consciousness for everything that the town is doing, and that kind of bringing that consciousness to everything. I mean, we do a lot of contracting in this town. So we really need you to help guide us and help us be thinking about that and everything that we, in the business that we conduct. So that's, and again, it ranges from really small things to really big things. Are we going to think about municipal solar in Shutesbury? And if we do, then what does that look like, and how does that happen? So there's a wide range of possibilities out there, and I kind of see this committee as bringing those issues to the forefront and keeping us all on our toes. So that's kind of my take, and I have confidence that she'll do that, given the composition of this committee.
Does anyone have anything that you want to share based on that? Gail?
Thank you, Rita, for that, and it gives a very nice frame to how the committee can move forward. So, I mean, there's so much out there, and it could be that our efforts are so scattered. But what you present is a frame within which we can work with and develop some focus or different foci toward efforts for the town in that larger frame. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
And thank you for the confidence in the committee.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Go, Graham?
And it couldn't be more timely for sure. So you not a minute too soon.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wish we had done it sooner, but I don't know. We've had a lot at the select board level, had a lot on our plate, and yeah, it was something I wanted to see happen, and I'm really thrilled that it did. And I'm really thrilled that we had this group. So there's one person missing, right?
Miriam.
Miriam isn't here tonight. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Great.
so I just thought of two things while you're here, Rita. One is just sort of a comment, and then one's an agenda item that I think we should just move forward. But the comment is, it seems like we should make a point at town meeting to have a committee report, just to let the community know that we exist.
Mhm.
So that would, we can discuss that, but that seems like that would make sense. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes committee reports are short and giving a full agenda, but it seems like if we can do that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I know in previous town meetings, we've sort of dispensed with long, but because it's a new committee, I think just letting the moderator know in advance that you'd like to introduce yourselves, and I think would be really, it would be good to do, because there's always an article at the beginning of town meeting to hear town reports. So.
Yeah, Dale?
And we can request that those reports be included in the minutes of the meeting. And they've done that the last couple of years is because we've been virtual. But it wouldn't be a bad practice, I think, to have the written reports available to those who look back at the minutes of the meeting.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah. Good.
So, and the agenda item before we let you go and have dinner is just, we had one new business item that Gail was following up on, Graham was following up on in terms of green communities. So I think I CC'd you in some of the communication, but it seems like if one of you two want to just sort of update us, since it's timely, and if Rita's here, it might help. So.
Gail, you touched base last, right, with Becky?
Okay, so the particular question was Becky's providing answers to questions that arose from the Green Communities review of the annual report as it was addressed. And I spoke with Becky about this just a couple of days ago, and she's on it. She's been on it. And I must say that she has felt under siege by emails and phone calls, both to her and to the select board, which is not, I think, frankly, productive for getting any information or any formulation moving forward. She's on it. In fact, she has been the one person from the last, 10, 11 years who's kept up the designation of green communities by putting in these reports every year. So she assured me that yes, she would have the answers back to the appropriate persons by the deadline, which is April 19th. What was even more interesting, though, in our conversation is, I sort of inquired, what is in the report, thinking maybe casting forward that this reporting might be a task of this new committee. And she said, well, it's not all that straightforward, because what's in the report is to answer questions about usage. For instance, why is there in town hall a decreased use in heating oil and an increased use of electricity? And she's the only one who can answer this. She's the one who has the institutional memory from the 2010, 2011 institution of the eligibility and of these things that we claimed we were going to do, because she has access to the data, but also because she has knowledge of what's going on. For instance, the installation of the, I've forgotten now the words.
The mini split.
Mini splits, right. So the mini splits as a consequence, there's going to be a lower use of oil as heating in town hall. There'll be an increased use of electricity. And there's a hooker on that, because with the installation of the mini splits was not an installation of automatic thermostats, which means that if somebody leaves town hall on Friday last and forgets to turn down the mini splits, that's going to run all weekend long. Now, she points out, people have been much more comfortable in town hall all this winter. Thank you. But there's a consequence to that in terms of use. And my response to that was, in terms of our establishing, one of the things that the committee wants to do is establish baseline use of electricity, of oil, of gas, of all of these things, that she's in a position to inform this committee of things, bring us up to date from the things that were added by grants in 2010, 2011, as a consequence of our being green communities. And she's flat out between now and town meeting, of course, but after town meeting, invite her to come to our committee and really bring us to date, bring us up to a good baseline of where we are in operations. Different from just the database. I mean, we can look up the database, but in terms of operation, yes, the mini splits were installed. Yes, there were no thermostats in. That invites us to apply in a grant for thermostats for one thing.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump in, Gail, just because I don't want to keep Rita from her dinner. I was mostly just because I think you raised it originally, like we had a deadline of the 19th, and I wanted to just
Yes.
make sure that we raised it. And it sounds like it's well covered and beyond that. So we're cool. So we can sort of take the next step after that. And I think inviting Becky after town meeting makes total sense because she knows firsthand a lot of this stuff.
Right.
So Rita,
And
you
I
can go
would
eat
say,
dinner.
I would just say, looking at all town buildings and energy usage would be really useful. So, we have, we use energy at the old town hall. I don't even know what's over there. I think there's a mini split maybe over there. I don't know how that's.
And this
how
could
that's
speak to a nice collaboration with the new
building committee.
charge of the town buildings committee.
Yeah. Yeah.
They should
Right.
be mutually informed.
Yeah. And I think, and Rita, just, we're cognizant that, as I mentioned at our last meeting, we 6 or 7 can't do this work. It's really a lot of collaboration with the other committees. So, that's the approach.
Yeah. Good.
so,
Good.
Great. Cool.
That's great. Well, thank you all for doing this. Really
Great.
thrilled.
Thank
So,
you.
and I'm happy to come back again
Okay.
after town meeting.
Yeah.
That
Have
sounds
some
Thank
good.
you,
meetings
Rita.
Between now and then. All right. Good night, everybody.
Okie dokie. Great. So I'll get us back on the agenda, I think. So thank you, Gail, for that update. It just seemed like if we needed intervention, having Rita there would be helpful, but it's good to know that we're okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of new business, there's 2 things. One was the Our Town article and the other was this rural energy pilot that Leslie brought forth. So in terms of the Our Town article, that was, I sent it out to you all. So it's, the town newsletter. And it seems like it was a good place to sort of announce that we exist and let people know, in addition to town meetings. So I don't know if people had thoughts, if it looked good to you, or if there's things I should tweak. Okay, looks like there's a consent. Okay, good. Thank you. I will send it to Janice and get that going. And then Leslie, do you want to share about the rural energy pilot?
Yes, I spent a lot of time learning more things. And it seems that we would totally qualify in that municipal arena where we could be reimbursed for 80%. And that means that let me just describe that means, because I didn't know before either. If we have, say, the new new roof on the elementary school became a site for community solar, that could qualify as municipal solar. It's, if we're using personal home rooftops, that's not municipal. But if we have another building, and I kept thinking we're putting a new roof, or I hope we're putting a new roof on the leaky one for the elementary school, that would be a perfect possibility for community solar. The Sirius community also was like, hey, you know, we have a place where we stack our wood. We could build a barn for that. And on top of that barn could be solar arrays that could also go into the grant. So I've spent some time researching it. I just got some more material from Mary Ann Connor today, you know, regarding the aggregates. But if we want to pursue the community solar, you know, we could use the elementary school and the
Hey,
parking
Leslie,
lot.
I was going to jump in quick because I want to talk about community solar later, more in depth. But there was
Okay.
the rural energy pilot that it was the UMass grant that she suggested. So, which is different from community solar.
Right.
That's sort of, so I don't know if
No,
there's.
it's not really. It's that community pilot. We would need to say, the town would need to say yes by April 19th. And then it could become a community solar project. So what I learned from all those things is that it all leads to community solar. And that pilot program from UMass is, I guess, just part of where we apply for the grant.
Okay.
So it's all one.
Okay. I guess I have two thoughts, questions, then we can just chat
Sure.
about it. But I mean, practically speaking, I can't imagine, I mean, the select board met tonight, so I can't imagine there's any way that the town would, or the select board would have to agree to apply and do the letter. So I think we'd just practically speaking miss it. Gail.
But let me answer that. All we need is a letter of intent. The design would be due, and Community Solar Co-op Power would help us with the design for free. And that would be due, I believe, July 19th. So all we need, you know, I know everybody's busy. All we need is just like a letter of intent by April 19th.
Gail.
But what is in the letter of intent? What commitment do we make for the town in any letter of intent?
Just we're interested. And we want to pursue, you know, the details, which would be due sometime in July.
Yeah. See,
It's not, you know, huge. It obviously, you know, I think if we were in charge, we would say, yes, here's our letter of intent. We're interested, sign, blah, blah, blah. You know, that would move us into the pool to be considered for the bigger details, which would be due in July.
Yeah. See, when I read the Federal Register, I'm sorry, Graham, you want to go?
I'll just, I think that probably committees aren't encouraged to issue letters of intent on anything. I think,
Well, I
I think
know.
we really
It's gotta
do
be
have
select
to
board.
go to the select board, yeah.
And
No,
they
I
don't really get
understand
until the
that.
26th.
I understand that, and I'm, you know, I've been working all week on it, realizing like, you know, we basically, like many of the committees and commissions, don't really have the power, but, you know, like Gail called Becky and found out about mini splits. Maybe Becky would say, sure, sign a letter of intent, or the select board might have an emergency. You know, this is like, we would be able to get 80% funding for this project and then own it. And, you know, it's like too good to be true.
Yeah, when I read the Federal Register thing, it didn't look at all like that, though. I mean, it said that, you know, it didn't say municipally owned solar. It said commercially available, you know, projects, which seems like a very different beast. So there was no like municipal ownership of it. It seemed more like rolling out solar in communities as opposed to community
Third
owned.
party ownership.
Yeah, it just didn't seem like that. And then, you know, there's only $10 million available, and it's national. So, you know, my sense is increasingly, you know, like why we would get it. I think it's a good idea. Just generally speaking, to pursue. I think this is an opportunity we probably should pass and figure out like what the next, if there's a next round or another opportunity or something. But I was dubious. Graham?
Yeah, that register item also mentioned that they were trying to balance out inequities in poor rural areas. I took it and I thought that with the whole country looking that we might not look very poor. So that was my concern. But the really hopeful thing on federal money is that there's $500 billion that as soon as the Republicans get out of the way, and they'll have to, something's going to happen, that there'll be a Katrina or something, and they'll get pushed on that. So there's really where the federal money's going to be sitting, I think.
Yeah, and
Let me just answer that.
Yeah.
Because in talking to Marianne, who's the manager of Co-op Power, the word municipal and commercial are interchanged. So it's like, so that's kind of the key here. I understand that we all feel maybe like we don't have the power, but I want to say that that word commercial, again, I spoke to Mary, I've spent like hours with her.
Thank you.
Yeah, so commercial and municipal, those are just like a lot of interchangeable words. And yes, they do give priority to poorer communities, but they also look at, and I think, with all the library stuff that happened years ago, we do have a population of people that are strapped. We definitely have a lot of different economic groups in Shutesbury, and we have people who are living on tight incomes and people that don't have solar. So, I'm excited to work on it. And municipal versus commercial, it's like, it's going to be commercial if it's not on your house.
Okay. Well, my impression is, especially given what Rita was saying, that this is, if we can get ahead of it and start planning and thinking about what it would look like. And, to Graham's point, there should be some federal money at some point, that the more we can be ready and have the pre-discussions, we can sort of jump. This one, I think, because even if Becky wanted us to, Becky would have to go to the select board. And they're straight out. So I think practically speaking, even if we wanted to do it, we couldn't do this one, but it's a good heads up that there are opportunities out there, and the more homework we do to get ready for it. It's, looking at the library as an example, the library, Marianne's been doing work since the last time around. And we were very ready for when the small grant came, the small library grant, where I think the only other competition was Otis. I don't think they had a rigorous process because they didn't live through our rejection. So the more we can prep, the better. And then we can be more competitive. So, well, I want to thank you for all your hours. And I don't think it should be for naught, because I think this is clearly one of the big projects we should be thinking about. And maybe we should invite, in our education, maybe we want to have Marianne come and just talk to us.
Yeah, Marianne would be happy to come. I wasn't sure she should come this first time because we're still getting acquainted, but she would happily come and give a presentation and answer questions, because I feel like I'm giving the answer. And again, I feel somewhat disempowered, because being on a committee like this, we don't have any power like the select board to say yay or nay, which is unfortunate, because there will be other opportunities for sure. But this one is one where Co-op Power might say they get the grant, and then we work with them to get the money. So I'm not giving up.
Oh, I don't think we should. So, well, move us forward to the old business. We sort of covered green communities, unless Gail, there's anything else you wanted to share on that. It seems like we're set. And with the MVP grant, I think I sent out the description, but I guess it was like a week or so ago, Becky and Rita and I met. The basic feedback that we got from our MVP representative, so the state person for I think it's the Pioneer Valley, was that our original idea was too broad. And he kept saying, you got to sort of narrow it down, be specific. So we ended up focusing on stormwater management and roads, which is something that they were interested in. And it was kind of, you can apply for a 2-year grant. They really, I don't know if they discourage it, but the way the funding works is you have to be able to finish your activities in year 1, because a lot of public grants you can carry over to another year. And with this state agency, EEA, apparently you can't. So you have to have something that's very discrete. And so the way we designed it was having some analysis of stormwater and roads in the first 6 months, then doing education and some policy regulatory review in the second 6 months, which seems like it's reasonable, and then doing implementation in year 2. So that's what Rita and Becky and I talked about. Becky sent it off to this guy, Andrew. We have yet to write it. It's due in the middle of May. So I'm waiting to hear back about if that got a thumbs up as an idea, but I'll keep you all posted. But it checks off the stormwater component that I think we talked about last time. And I mean, there's like so much to stormwater. So this is going to be one little piece. So any questions about that? Okay.
Well, can you be more specific about when you say stormwater management? Is that like we get storms and the dirt roads wash out? And we're
Well, in
grants
this case, what we're talking, there's 2 things that we focused on, which was what Becky had suggested. One was there's stormwater in our dirt roads, so them getting washed out and just sort of the beating that they take, the fact that there's, flooding and freezing and mud, et cetera. And then the other places where driveways hit dirt roads. And so there's more driveways now, and they're steeper, and there's more water and more volume in the water. And so part of the idea is to look around town to find places where, whether it's Lake Viola, and, because that's an issue that Miriam brought up last time, of stormwater running down the roads into the lake, or driveways eroding the roads. And so it's just a narrow part of the bigger issue of stormwater management generally. And so the idea is to have a consultant sort of survey the entire town based on those 2 things. So looking at driveways and dirt roads, or dirt roads and pavement, come up with priority areas that we can actually work on. And then the nice thing about MVP is they prioritize its natural solutions, is the term of the approach. So, it's not creating conduits and, water control systems, but more, can you have a rain garden alongside the water, or, whatever the natural intervention would be. So the solutions that get recommended would be that, and we could then implement it. Some of the priority things in the second year, and things that we don't have time for, at least we'll have a list identified of where they are and what the solutions can be. And then the highway department, perhaps, or we could write another grant for it. So it's, it's a long list, but that's the idea. So, and I think it's just, the frequency of rain and the volume of rain is just sort of, and then the inconsistency of the weather, so it used to be that it froze all the time, and now it's freezing and thawing, and on and on. So more to come on that one.
All right, thank you for explaining it. It's
Graham.
Yeah.
You're muted, Graham. We're missing your words of wisdom. Oh, try again.
UMass has a bunch of water management things with new buildings of just, they swale land, they put in, plantings of reedish things, and it looks wonderful, and it stops the water. So, so it's definitely a great way to go. I just got to plug a thing in here. That's
Okay.
all.
Cool. So if we shift to, I think the bigger discussion stuff is just the reports and I want to thank everyone for doing all the research to bring it. And Nate, you want to sort of kick us off with municipal aggregation?
Sure, be happy to. Let me just call this up. Great. Let me know if you can see
Yep.
the slide deck.
So,
Slide deck.
Yes.
Super, super. Well, great. I just learned about the idea of municipal aggregation just about 3 weeks ago, maybe. And this is also called community choice aggregation. And I learned about it from an interview with David Sue. And he was talking about this journal article that he had just written. And the article describes Massachusetts legislation that allows communities to take over the electricity supply function from utility monopolies, right? So National Grid or Eversource. So when you get an electricity bill, it has at least two parts. There's delivery and then there's supply of electricity. And in Massachusetts, a lot of the default supply of electricity comes from fossil gas, so natural gas. As an individual household, you could purchase through a variety of mechanisms, clear choice or clean choice energy. You might get things in the mail offering to boost the proportion of green electricity that you get. So you could, as an individual, purchase, say, 100% wind farm energy from a mill farm in Texas, for example. But the utility, National Grid, it still delivers electricity to your house. So community choice aggregation, the basic idea, as I understand it, is a whole community jumping to a new supply structure all at once. So under aggregation, utility still does the delivery part. So it sends bills, it maintains power lines. If you have a power outage, they will answer the phone and address it. And one thing that really jumped out at me when I started looking into this is how many communities, cities and towns in Massachusetts have already structured or are in the process of doing community choice aggregation. So I'll just call it CCA from here on out. So what CCAs do is they purchase electricity through a contract and they become the default supplier in a community. And it's in the legislation that individuals can always opt out. But in fact, like most people stay within program, and towns and communities don't need to do this alone or by themselves. So one of the most well-known CCAs is Cape Light Compact. And it's also one of the first CCAs to really get going. And that organizes the electricity that supplies 21 towns in their area. So why would you want to, as a community, join a CCA or form one? So within a CCA, you can offer residents a wide variety of choices. So one might be to lock in a lower rate because you're able to bid as a community, and you can also sign a contract that lasts a set period of time, so you're not as vulnerable to just the fluctuations of the gas market, the price of natural gas, for example. Another objective might be to make the default supply of electricity to your community greener, that is above the state requirement that's set statewide. So, and you could also offer a 100% renewable option to your community. There are more ambitious CCAs that fund local development and climate resilience projects. So going back to Cape Light Compact, they charge a fraction of a cent per kilowatt hour and they're able to raise revenues that way and then fund solar installation. They did this on all of the member schools, funding the provision of solar through their CCA. And they were also able to capitalize a low-income solar revolving grant program. So they were able to offer like zero interest loans, or in some other way subsidize solar for people who would not otherwise be able to afford it. So that was pretty interesting. So the next two slides are just examples of existing or proposed CCAs. So I was surprised to find that there are 13 towns in Franklin County. It's 12 in Franklin and then 1 in Hampshire County that are that have a CCA stood up. It's been working for a couple of years. And with this slide, I'm just showing you what the rate structure looks like. So you can see that you might not be able to see, sorry if it's quite small, but on the left-hand side of these two rows are the default electrical offering, which in the case of Conway offers 25% Massachusetts Class 1 RECs above the standard. And thanks, Gail, I see you. You have a
I'm
question?
just pointing out that on your top of your screen is a thing called View Options, and you can enlarge what's on your screens.
Oh, thank you, Gail.
For sure. Is that bigger? Is
Yeah,
That's good.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
that's
you.
bigger? All right, you can see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll zoom out in a second, but this is great. I also attached these to the committee earlier, but hopefully you can see this. So across the 13 towns, there are slightly different rate structures. Sorry, this is a little hard for me to handle. I got it. Hopefully you can see that. And I just picked two to show you how these towns decided to manage a basic option, which I presume is either comparable or slightly cheaper than what you would just normally get through a default. And then, they're able to offer these greener solutions as well on top of that. All right, let me back out of that. Yes, Gail.
So are these options available individually, or would the whole contract have to be to choose an option?
Right. So my understanding is the whole town jumps to the CCA. And then, for example, if you already are getting solar because you have rooftop solar, you still get to keep the benefits of that. And then I believe you would automatically be assigned the standard default, but with the option to go lower in terms of the amount of renewables, or plus up, if you will, or leave the program altogether, right? Is
Individuals have those options.
Individuals have those options. Yeah. But right now the default is National Grid decides what the mix of electricity is, and they just call that basic service.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm almost wrapping up here, but I wanted to show you a CCA that's being developed with Amherst, Pelham, and Northampton. So this is still in the process of being developed, but in their documentation, they had this really, I thought, useful CCA 1, 2, and 3 structure that would help us talk about and think about what a CCA can do. So, one goal might be, let's just reduce rates, right, by going through a bidding process. a CCA 2.0 sort of brings in some of these green objectives, these carbon reducing objectives with our supply. And then 3.0 is more like that Cape-like compact, where you're gathering revenues and then applying that to more ambitious decarbonization efforts, or just addressing equity issues that we would have as a community through a small slice of the kilowatt hour. So this is my wrap-up slide. So of course, the simple version of this is there is a decision by a community to look into this. Then there would be plan development, ample opportunities for community input and a vote, depending upon the governance structure of the community. And one approach is to start from scratch. Another one is to look into joining an existing CCA, or it could be individuals making these decisions. So that was my wrap up for municipal aggregation.
Thank you, Nate. Gail?
Does geographic proximity have anything to do with it? You've presented one CCA that's ongoing now, the Franklin County, and one that's coming up. But I noticed the towns in the Franklin County one include New Salem and towns right close to us, in addition to the ones over across the river. Does geographic location have anything to do at all with it?
That's a great question for the geographer.
Yeah.
I have to believe that, and I didn't map the 12 Franklin County communities. So, I have to imagine that just at a practical level, because of the nature of the decision-making process, that, some geographic, close enough would have to.
You got to be in the same utility. I think National Grid, Eversource, those are constraints for a start.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think geographic, other than what Graham just said, doesn't matter.
No.
From what, like I went to a webinar about a month ago with, Green Consumers Alliance, because they have one. And, there's a couple, I think it's just that you're contracting, so you're buying into something. And so like with the Pelham, Amherst, Northampton, they all just got together and decided they were going to do this. So you're sort of contracting on the buying side, and then the geography actually doesn't matter on the supply side either, which isn't it? Like you could get wind from Texas,
Right.
So I mean it gets pretty. My sense is there's lots of issues in there. Like just thinking about the local solar stuff. So like the Green Consumers Alliance, they're buying green solar, but they're not differentiating. It could be terrible solar out of somewhere. So that's like one of the challenges of. So we're just a little more discerning nowadays, and like
Yeah, as we
So-
should be.
yeah. So, but any other question, Leslie?
I have an article that being on an iPad, I can't really share it, but it's about the pros and cons of this. And perhaps I could email it now to Michael or Nate, and you could share it on the screen. It's just a link, and we can all look at it if we have time
Sure.
for that.
Well,
Yeah.
can I definitely want us to look at it. I guess I have a process question for us. Because it seems like, what I wanted to do is respect everyone who is reporting back, so like, there was the community solar, and then Gail, if there was funding, and Zoe or Leslie about local food, and then Nate about the data benchmark, which are all full-fledged discussions in and of themselves.
Sure.
And so I'm thinking that part of this might be just reporting out and sharing information. And then later in the meeting, we can figure out, do we want to dig into this and sort of figure out, well, how do we
Follow up.
go deeper and have a conversation about pros and cons and what we proceed with? Because in addition to these, there's things we're not even touching upon. So
Right.
does that make sense? And Leslie, you should email it to me, because then we
Yeah,
can,
I'll email it and then,
Yeah.
we can either share it or you can distribute it, after the meeting and people can look.
yeah, Graham?
My guess on municipal aggregation is that that would make more sense to add oneself to an existing aggregating group, because the more they have, I would think the better, the better their price. If they're bigger, they get a better price. So therefore, I would think that checking in with Pelham and Amherst would be to ask, are they National Grid? Most of our town, I think 95% of our town is National Grid, and maybe 5% is Eversource. So if they're National Grid, then if ask. Could Nate just ask them, make contact and ask if they were wanting to add anyone to their aggregation group?
Thanks to a connection that Michael hooked up for me, I did ask, and that is the vision for the Amherst, Pelham, Northampton CCA is to involve more communities that are interested in their approach. So that is, I think, part of their vision, and yeah, maybe a point of follow-up. And I don't want to get ahead of things, but I don't know if we invite guests to the committee to present on sort of what people are up to, but conceivably, I also put a lot of basically what I learned from these sources on this slide. Maybe give people a chance to kind of read up on some of this as well.
That'd be great. Gail?
On one of your slides, Nate, you had an article in the newspaper about the Franklin County startup, and that cited Bob Armstrong, who is part of SECPR, and I could call him or chat with him at least about, do they want to add or ask those same questions that you asked for the Pelham group, if that's all right with this committee, to see, would they be amenable to someone wanting to join them? Do they see that as part of their, and what that would mean?
Yeah. Why don't we just hold both of those questions and figure out the follow-up for later?
Okay.
The one question I would just throw out for us to ponder, because I don't know the answer, is if joining aggregation is mutually exclusive of municipally owned generation. So if we wanted to pursue municipal solar, but we enter into an aggregation contract, one could be short-term, one could be longer term, that might work, but understanding what that means would be really helpful, like in terms of committing. So, but why don't we switch? Leslie, is there anything more about community solar that you wanted to share from your talking to Marianne?
Let's see.
Oh, Gail?
I have a personal question for you, Leslie. I think you said
Yeah.
last time that you have co-op power as your
Yes.
source.
Well, I'm doing community solar, so through co-op power.
So did
So
you choose them in your choice of local server as opposed to National Grid or Clean Energy or any of these others?
Well, it goes through National Grid, and the way that this works through co-op power is you save 15% on your electric bill.
Okay, so that's
But-
your choice within, okay, good, thank you.
So I'm going through National Grid, but I'm
Right.
getting the energy through co-op power
Got
and
it.
then saving 15%. And suppose, I'm still looking for where's that green energy coming from? Because we all know that there's the debacle in Conway with NextAmp was not where I would ever want to get my solar from, et cetera. So I'm doing it, and my electric bill this month was $10.
Well, okay, Zoe?
I have a question about community solar, and if like a municipal installation is the same as a commercial installation. I'm just thinking about our farms specifically, and it's a commercial operation, and we have a lot of open land that's already open, and if we could be involved in like an installation because we're commercial.
Well,
You,
I think-
you could lease the town could lease, anyone could lease your land. It would make it separate to you. So it doesn't have to be that what your business is. It can be a separate business to the power generation. And Michael, I do have an answer to your question.
Oh, good.
That I'm quite sure that that you can have municipal generation happening somewhere, and we could be aggregating, because the aggregator would be buying, if they were buying green energy, they would be getting it from, they could
Somewhere
be
else.
potentially buying it from our green thing. I mean, that's how it works. They're just getting it from whatever green is for the part that's green. So they're not mutually exclusive, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
right. And
It's how you write the contract?
The aggregator aggregates with the proportions of whatever, and if the town is generating solar, then the aggregator is one way or the other. Someone is going to be buying those green kilowatts. That's just, it's going into the grid. You won't get the electrons necessarily, but it's feeding the grid with kilowatt hours, and that's what's the bottom line. So
Okay, cool. So Leslie, you want to continue on? with
Yeah,
your-
to also answer Zoe's question, I mean, again, having Mary Ann come and really, because she eats and breathes this stuff. But, like I mentioned earlier, the Sirius community, which is also, like your farm, it's not owned by the town. With doing community solar, we would need sites in town that would be the sites, and then the town would reap the benefit of eventually owning those sites. I think owning those sites or owning the electricity that's
Owning
generated. So that it means that if we got the grant for 80%, with all the extra electricity generated, that would probably pay off the 20% in a few years, maybe 7 or 8 years, and then the town would own it. So I don't know how that works, if we did it like on the school versus the Sirius community versus your farm, or we used all 3 sites and more, and then the whole town was getting its electricity from our own solar, and then eventually we own it, and the profits go back to the town to use in different ways that the town needs its money and uses it.
Zoe, 25-year leases are often are something that is done for things like this as well. A 25-year lease, because you wouldn't be able to use your land because it'd have solar on it.
So I guess I just have a question. I don't know if it's Leslie and Graham. It seems like you know a lot, but
Mhm.
in my mind, there's town-owned buildings which are municipally owned.
Right.
Or the school, like the school or town hall or something. Then there's privately owned opportunities, whether it's Sirius or Zoe's farm, or someone wants to lease out their field.
Yeah,
And
and I
those-
even
that's sort
thought,
of, and that's
Yeah.
that's like the ownership part, so like it seems like you can have different sources owned by public or private, and then it's essentially getting aggravated under a community umbrella of some sort. So the sources are going in, and then you have the consumers who are buying that. I mean, it seems like it's sort of similar to aggregation, but on a very local level. Am I getting that right?
I'm not sure what aggregation, the aggregation seems to me like, I don't know if I sent the link to you, Michael.
Oh, let me check. Sorry.
Yeah,
I-
because I know you have a few, yeah. The aggregates are different because of where it's coming from. Like this would be coming from Shutesbury as opposed to a wind farm in Texas.
Yeah.
So and I also thought, what about the Shutesbury Athletic Club, which I think is privately owned? I'm looking at where are all the roofs and who owns them, sort of starting with town-owned buildings might be in some ways better, but I don't know. Marianne also put forth like the Sirius community might be a site. So, we're just beginning the conversation, and I'm beginning to understand what community solar is and how it could work in our town. And then we own it. We own the solar. We won't necessarily own Zoe's field.
Right.
But the town owns all that solar coming off it. But again, to have Marianne come and speak, or even for me to get questions from the group and say to Marianne, okay, here's the questions. Now we have a field, perhaps like at Zoe's place, and maybe the school, because there's a parking lot there, and there's also a new roof going on. And then there was a new roof that went on the Shutesbury Athletic Club. I'm not sure, always looking for sites. And then again, looking at, they like to have, as you said, communities who can't afford this be recipients is definitely a plus to getting the money.
Gail and then Graham.
Also questions, for instance, in the fire department and town hall.
Oh, right, yeah.
Why or how did they choose not to have it on the roofs, but to have them in freestanding structures outside? And if those free structures are adjustable or not, who takes care of that adjusting? Or if there are mechanisms you can buy to do the adjusting, all those complicating questions.
Right.
I think I've got the answer to roof versus on land, and I'll send a website link that is very good that explained it. But you can get the cost of a the cost of a watt, the cost per watt to generate a watt is about $1. If it's surface based, land based, and $3, it's 3 times as much to put it on a roof. So if you've got $1 million, if you've got a roof and that's all you got, then that's what you should do. But if you've got $1 million, then it's better to put, and you can find land that you can lease, that's open and that's not contentious and that's not wetlands and all the issues.
Right.
Then you're going to get 3 times as many kilowatts off for the dollar, for your $1 million or whatever it is. So that's the reason for not going on roofs. And I was on the board for the Shutesbury AC, and we did discuss it many times. And there were various reasons why it wasn't going to go on the roof of the AC. So, but the cost per the cost per watt is a pretty compelling one, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it was cheaper to do a ground mount than to put it on an old building's roof.
Yeah.
That wasn't. gonna
If you
stay
had
up.
an amount of money, you'll get 3 times as many watts.
Well, that's good to know. That's great.
Yeah.
That's good.
And it is about in 2021. I'll send you the web link. It's very interesting. The cost is about $1 per watt, which is interesting because you get a megawatt for $1 million, and
Okay,
and a
great.
megawatt, as we know from, it takes about 5 acres of just things. So that's too big. But
Great.
And
it's,
who knows what the state of your building and roof is going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now. So you
Right.
don't have to undo any of that.
Yeah.
Right.
So just, Leslie, is there anything else you want to add? Or are we good moving on for now?
I think I kind of covered it, again, if we got a grant that covered 80%, we would generate enough electricity to pay off the 20%. So and I don't know, I'll follow up with Marianne, because if the April 19th deadline is just a letter of intent and we don't have any authority to get through to make that, what else can we do if we were looking at a July deadline? Shall I pursue that?
Yeah, well, I think if my understanding when I've written grants, is it's always good to get a letter of commitment, but it might not be necessary because they're submitting a letter of intent. So all they have to say is they've talked to interested communities, and then, we could get more information between now and then.
Right, and I have one more comment. The other thing about community solar is Co-op Power for free would design the grant. not necessarily, they would hold our hand as we were doing it without charging. And then, so not everybody just says, hey, I'm gonna design you a program. So that's one thing.
Cool.
Anyway, I'm excited about it and happy to follow up or not, depending how uphill it is.
Okay, well, let's figure out before we end the meeting what our next steps are.
Sure.
Gail, did you have any opportunity to do funding inventory or no? No pressure.
I looked up there, several funding opportunities, mostly through green communities, but I looked at the projects that were funded, that were awarded. They're very much like the ones that we were awarded in 2010, 11, following the energy audit. So I think it really goes back again to establishing a baseline and seeing where we are and how we want to improve on various metrics before we start looking at particular funding for particular things. Leslie, I did look for funding for, I now know what's called mycomediation mushrooms. And there are a number of studies that are growing mushrooms to investigate the mediation possibilities, but they're wanting money. They're not giving money. So.
Okay, cool. And I don't know, Zoe and Leslie, is there any local food stuff that you want to share at this point? And again, it's just that you all said that you were interested. Not that if you didn't do it, that's fine. But if you had stuff you wanted to report out.
Zoe, you're
Zoe,
muted.
you muted. There you go.
Yeah, well, I haven't moved on this idea yet, but I'll present it to the group, which is I wanted to reach out to the librarian and look into the idea of a workshop series through the library. And I'm also hosting a workshop that's being advertised through the library at the farm for people who are wanting to participate in a community garden that's happening in Shutesbury. So I was just thinking, like, wanting to connect to also other people who have farmstead operations and kind of talk about a kind of a show off series, also like some site visits. And once we have that crew of people who's already interested in participating in the community garden, taking them to other places where people know how to do this stuff. So that's just what I'm been thinking about and excited about. And I'll reach out to the librarian, or if anyone else has any ideas for other people I could connect to.
Gail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suggest Barbara Bigelow. She's chair of the Recreation Committee. And
Yeah,
they're a big part behind the garden, the town garden.
She's the one who called me to do the
Okay.
workshop later this month. Yeah.
Small towns are helpful in that regard.
Yeah, really.
Cool. Why? It seems, I mean, both directions, the farmstead and the workshop, seem like things we can do. I mean, let's just go through it. I think there's just the benchmarking that Nate's going to present, and then we can sort of figure out, like, where do we go from here? Because it seems like that's the big question of, like, how do we proceed? But both internally as for our meetings, but also sort of externally. But are we good moving on from food and we'll do the data benchmarking? Nate, you got another set of slides, right?
I do, yeah. I hope this isn't death by PowerPoint. So
No way to go.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
You're lifting us up in terms of quality.
No
I
apologies.
love PowerPoint, yeah. Okay, how's this one? I will give a heads up.
Perfect.
I can
Great.
see. Mhm.
Great, great. You know, this is a deck that it really does have some fine, small font. So you might want to call it up from your email to have it a little closer. But you know, that's especially true on a couple of graphs. But you know, this presentation was really just to start to get a sense of existing sources of data and you know, thinking about how the town might leverage these data to you know, guide some of our decision-making recommendations, and really also to try to identify where some of the gaps might be. So looking at this pie on the right, this is greenhouse gas emissions at the national level, captured in this pie chart. Shutesbury, of course, would be quite different, but to structure my research, I kind of started with the assumption that most of Shutesbury's carbon emissions are probably related to transportation, electricity generation, home heating. You know, there may be other buckets that we should take a look at. And then on the production side, you know, we've been talking a little bit about the town's solar installations at the fire station, town hall, and the elementary school. There's a sort of an unknown around how much household solar there is in town. You drive around town, you see a lot of solar panels on people's rooftops. So as a data gap, you know, that might be one that we just want to be aware of. So since we don't have much in the way of public transportation, vehicle ownership might offer a useful proxy for cars in town. Although this doesn't really get at vehicle use, there are estimates available at the state and the county level. These data are from a representative household survey that the Census Bureau conducts. And yeah, Gail actually had a really interesting idea about what we might learn from excise taxes that are related to cars potentially. So that is, rather than just like read the numbers off, I will just refer you to the slide deck in your inbox. I was only able to find electricity generation sources at the state level. And I appreciate that this is going to be a hard one to read, but the EPA data suggests that Massachusetts does better than the national average for solar generation. So that's the light blue pie slice on the Massachusetts side of things. But we rely heavily on natural gas. So about 78% of our electricity generation comes from natural gas versus 40% for the nation. And I mean, just given how the transmission wires run, it's hard to be more granular than the state, right? Because these lines cross state borders. So a regional perspective might be good. So when you look at where Massachusetts sits for carbon dioxide per megawatt hour of electricity, we're slightly worse than the median state in the nation, if I'm understanding this EPA data correctly. Could be due to our reliance on fossil gas. Okay, and sort of the last category that I looked at was home heating fuel. So when I look out my window, I see these trucks pass all the time throughout the winter. And there are county level estimates from that same American Community Survey that the Census Bureau conducts. we burn quite a bit more home heating oil as a percentage than the state as a whole. So that's this sort of mustard color here. So for Franklin County, 44% of the 30,000 households in the county are using fuel oil versus 25% for the state as a whole. And if you look at this dark blue slice of the pie, that's 17% utility gas, which I believe we don't have in Shutesbury. I was looking at a map of gas lines, and so I think that 17% would probably be spread out across fuel oil, wood, a liquid propane, or electricity generation. So that's what I found for home heating. So, again, this is just meant as to start the conversation, I guess, and people on the committee may be aware of some of these data, but for me, it was good just to kind of get a footing. And there is a lot of useful data out there. Generally, it's at the county level at best. And, there are Shutesbury specific data sources, and Gail really had some good ideas here, just through some of the reporting that is done even at the building level for the town-owned buildings, the municipal buildings. There are sources of data there. But in general, the granularity of available data is a challenge, right? So how does Shutesbury compare to the county? How does Shutesbury compare to the state is a challenge. So we'll, I think, need to think about how to better understand our emissions as we think about, as we set benchmarks, just as where we're starting, and then goals as well. I felt like I came up short this round, but I'll just close with the idea that some communities undertake what's called a greenhouse gas inventory. So they look at their land use, how many vehicles are being used, how people heat their homes, and that might be an area of work. It also might require some primary data collection, such as a survey, going out and getting new data to analyze, and potentially some additional expertise as well. So just some food for thought there, but that's what I came up with on data for this.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks.
Nate.
Yeah, thanks.
Gail,
You've capitalized greenhouse gas inventory. Is that a particular form that's being used across communities? So if we were to make the same inventory, we would get comparable statistics.
So I think it's more of a methodology, and I saw resources for how much of the land area in your community is forested, how much is farmland, and those just become inputs to in a process that yields a number at the end of it, or a series of numbers. I don't know how much like organizational heft is built around that, but it was capitalized because I understood it as a process that is somewhat formalized that you can then apply to your own town.
cool. Any other questions? Well, this is very helpful.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
could come up with these figures by devising our own survey, right?
So I received the police committee survey, and I think if you asked the community, how do you heat your home, it doesn't seem like terribly invasive, but perhaps there would be a productive conversation to have around what does the town need to understand in order to, guide our recommendations even, because one kind of question is how much electricity do we actually want to be able to generate as a town to meet our needs. Potentially a survey.
Yeah. So we got time, which is good. I mean, what I think it would be helpful, given all that we just discussed, is figuring out how we want to, I mean, I think we're going to have this conversation for a while. Like, how do we want to proceed and what we want to do? Because
Who are we and
we're
why?
figuring, yeah. But I'll just throw out some like general thoughts. I mean, there's how we continue to educate ourselves, so there's we talked about inviting people in, so like we can't make recommendations unless we understand ourselves. So, inviting people and figuring out, well, how do we incorporate that? Whether it's, Darcy about the aggregated generation, or Marianne, as two examples that came up today. So that's sort of one. There's some big projects which require information, whether going back to the beginning of the meeting where, Gail was saying that Becky, because she's the town administrator, knows a lot about stuff. But on the other hand, what strikes me is, part of our charge is working with other committees, and also our survival is based on working with other people, because there's no way we could do these complex projects. So it could be that, just as an example, using the greenhouse gas inventory, we could say we want to do it and learn enough that we then go pitch it to other committees or the community and say, we need a working group who's going to work on this stuff. And maybe, Nate's sort of the convener of that group, but, we get 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people who are doing it, or we do the same thing with trying to figure out one of the discussions we talked about, or about some other project, or with the Muni Solar, if there's a project that we want to sort of move ahead, that maybe one of us is championing that as a group, and we got a group of people doing the work, but it comes back to this committee to figure out how we're doing and status and all that. So I'm just so there's sort of an external focus, and then there's the internal education. And then I think the other thing that strikes me, getting back to Rita's comments, is there's the small stuff, so in our conversations, we might stumble onto small things, whether it's the charging stations is a small, very tangible thing. And then there's obviously the monster thing of like, how do we do municipally owned solar, which is and I think going forward on anything that we want, depending on the size, like we have to figure out, well, and then just sort of engaging the rest of the committees. Because I think if we can highlight stuff, like if we learn things, we can make recommendations. So this is, I'm not sure if the highway department knows this, but Graham, to your point about sort of the rain gardens and sort of the reed stuff installations that UMass use, if we can figure out, well, how do you learn about that? Or who's the person who sort of can provide that? All we have to do is make the connection and make the recommendation with the highway department. We don't actually have to do the work of that. So, yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I think it could be. I mean, there's expertise there. And so it's a matter of like, who do we ask to step up and own it? So I'm not offering it like specifics, but more of like how we manage our work so that we can sort of assist the rest of the town to move forward and stay with their heads above water. Because we could easily drown very quickly, I think. So Graham.
And I think even though information is very wonderful, what we can be very sure of is we don't necessarily need a lot of granularity, because we know we have, I know from my household, what my carbon, debit is, and probably no one is zero carbon in this group that I'm looking at right here, and so the first few, I would suggest the first attention that we focus on is to do something about that, so that there is that progress, because eventually we can find out, oh, well, what's left. But if we don't start doing, if we spend a lot of time studying the problem, I think we already understand the problem is that we're generating too much carbon dioxide and methane. So yeah, that would be, and I'm an engineer. I mean, that's a problem for an engineer. They want to do things. I understand that that's kind of like, a psychological problem, but yeah. So yeah, I think that that's the other thing for data. The national census probably does give out data by zip code, and I think the questions were asked about households. It might be just census data that would tell us a lot about 01072.
Heating oil on the census?
Yeah, I think there was stuff about my household, energy and things like that.
Really?
No? Yeah. Am I remembering that wrong, or did I just make mistakes?
I don't remember that, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else have, Nate?
Just very quickly to respond to Graham's point, the dashboard that I was looking at, because it's a representative household survey, I think there are probably some parts that remain representative at the zip code, and other parts maybe not. But there's no question that the Census Bureau is just has a wealth of information that I didn't even scratch the surface. So yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think the one challenge. Leslie?
Well, I think also like the data for the last couple of years, I know personally, like I'm not driving as much as I used to because of COVID. Like I'm not going to parties and dances,
Gas bills.
all the other things I used to do several times a week. So I imagine, when and if COVID is really done, more, driving more carbon will be emitted. But I really appreciate, Nate bringing it all there. And also what Zoe said, I could see another program at the library be about people's land use, or, what kinds of chemicals they're using even on their gardens. I think many people are doing organic or practicing no-till, but there are lots of people who just are spraying all kinds of things, and as long as it's available, people are using it. So
Yeah.
it could be some sort of other program.
Leslie, that actually just reminds me, because one of the other things that struck me, I forgot to mention, was, when Zoe was talking about doing the workshops, that, I mean, Zoe, you asked the question about, where's the group at with this idea? And I was thinking, well, we can surface things that are interesting, and we don't necessarily have to have the answers. We have to just be able to find a presenter who we think would be informative to town. So that's a pathway. Like, so with the farmstead folks, can just sort of putting that out there and trying to convene groups, or getting someone who can speak to community gardening. We become a resource to the community, but it's sort of a lower bar of quality control, so to speak. Like, we don't have to know all the stuff. We just have to feel comfortable, like this is a worthwhile thing to share. And then we can sponsor it and ask Marianne at the library if she wants to do it. So I think that's another approach. One could say, oh no, we have to understand it before we present it. That's a different approach. I don't necessarily think that's required, but I'm just throwing it out there to see what people think.
Right.
Gail. Gail and then
I'd
Leslie.
like to speak for a survey of the town to serve two purposes. One, to get us data about heating oil, numbers of cars, how many solar roofs, your question, Nate, how many people have solar panels in their backyard or on their roofs. But also, the second purpose is to get those kinds of concerns out there coming from this committee on behalf of the town and energy use and energy efficiency at both the personal and the town level, and start to get people knowing or thinking about it as a town question and what part they may play in the town efforts and town use.
Yeah, that is a good idea. I totally agree. Yeah, we should survey just to really draw attention to the fact that the town is interested, we're interested, and yeah. The question immediately springs to mind: is your household interested in getting an electric car in the next 5 years, 10 years? We could sow the seeds even just with the question. So
Yeah. And I think in terms of the education stuff, one could ask, are there areas that you'd like to learn more about?
Right.
It seems like asking the
concern.
community is always a good idea.
May I go ahead and start working
Yes.
on getting
a survey.
yeah, and then, send it out to you guys to add, amend,
Okay,
adapt, massage, tweak.
great. Mhm.
Does everyone think this is a good approach?
Yeah, I was about to suggest
Yeah.
that we start off with, and people can throw in their own questions of interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds
So
great.
cool.
It's an iterative process among all of us.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, and I like it too. Gail, thanks for bringing it up. It seems like if we use that as a tool, it might actually, to your point, we can include different parts of how we want to inform our work going forward, whether it's educational or data building or
Right.
kicking off an initiative.
All three, all the
Yeah.
above.
Right.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
And then we'll
I-
pass it by somebody who knows what a real survey should look like.
Yeah, that police survey I had a hard time with that.
We don't
one.
need to go there.
It's very true. Yeah.
We don't need to go there.
Yeah,
Leslie.
we should find a surveyor. Any expertise?
Yeah.
I'm not a designer of surveys, but
Mhm.
I've done a lot, but I would not do this for town. Leslie?
Well, 2 points. One about the police survey. They got a 20% return, which was unusually high. So that's interesting, maybe because they sent it out twice. I don't know. And the other thing I just wanted to circle back to the community solar, as part of the project, can include charging stations. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I'll just say for the record, when I was on the select board, we put money in for a charging station in town. I forget if we got it for a grant, we just budgeted, and it never went in. This truly frustrating. So
2011.
no, this was like 2018 or something, 2017.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was supposed to happen. So I think we're in agreement that the survey, we can just, revisit that over the next couple of meetings and guide us. In terms of the bring people in to help us understand complex concepts like the aggregation of the community solar. I mean, I can imagine we just have a meeting dedicated to, a chunk of it to a presentation. So, we could have Darcy come and talk about aggregation for Pelham and Amherst and Northampton. We could have Mary Ann. And just to understand, I don't, and if we identify other things, we can sort of do a rolling thing. Like if we find someone who knows anything about municipal solar or, or even smaller things, but stuff that we're trying to understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Should we can, let's see, well, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but following on Nate's suggestion last time that we all agreed to, that we meet every other week, we would meet on the 26th. So I don't know, Gail, in terms of the survey, if you want, we could probably at least have some conversation about our rudimentary survey by then. And I don't know if it would be premature to invite Mary Ann or Darcy, or just sort of wait until push it out for a month and make sure scheduling works and stuff.
Who's
Um,
Darcy or Darcy? that you-
Darcy is the person who's coordinating the Pelham, Amherst, Northampton aggregations. She used to be a town councilor in Amherst, and she's working on this for like 5 years, I think. So, but there could be other people.
Yeah, I kind of think, you know, on the 26th, if Darcy or Marianne is available, I kind of feel like, you know, we're going to be able to move forward if we understand the differences. Like I would even say, like, if they both came on the 26th or one, or, you know, just to sort of get some more input to see where we might want to, you know, which directions we want to move in, really understand from the sources, pros and cons.
Yeah. I like the idea of both of them at the same time, because then they
Yes.
can respond to each other.
Yeah, I like that, because they're both incredibly knowledgeable, and yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to ask Marianne if she were available for the 26th, and I don't know Darcy, but
Okay. Well, if we continue to plan for like, you know, a 2-hour meeting, we could have them, you know, talk to us for like 45 minutes or so, or an hour, and then, you know, do the survey and then pick up whatever drips and drabs. So it makes sense. Does that sound about right?
I would say, I would suggest they could talk for half an hour, just so you don't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we
yeah.
have
No, collective.
we have
Yeah.
time, digestion and Q&A and whatever, but yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to ask Marianne. Does anybody know Darcy to ask her, or?
I moved to Nate, since you've been talking to her. Does that sound good to you?
What's her
Yeah, I
last
can reach
name?
out.
Dumont, Dumont.
Okay. And if we ask them, do we have like a time? Because if we're meeting from 7 to 9, should we ask them to come like at 7:30 or?
I'd say like 7:15, because if we
Okay.
do public comments at the beginning, and then we could
Okay.
roll into that. Gail?
Nate, if Darcy is not able to come, could I invite Bob Armstrong? From the point of view of a done deal and how he did community outreach and blah, blah, blah.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is
I
that
mean-
Bob Armstrong from Butland, or?
I think he's from Greenfield or Conway, but he was the one who initiated and shepherded the whole,
Okay, great.
the
Yeah.
Franklin County one that Nate had in his slide.
Yeah. Well, Gail, maybe it makes sense to do him instead of Darcy, since they exist, right? I mean, it's
See
an
who's
argument to,
Either one, whichever one could come.
available. Okay.
okay. Okay.
Nate, do you have a feeling about that?
I don't have a strong feeling.
Gail, do
do
you
it
have a
now.
feeling? He doesn't, do you? Gail?
I'm happy to talk to Bob.
Okay,
So why don't you do that? And then if you strike out, you let
No,
Nate.
get- Okay, good.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Okay, so we'll plan on inviting the two of them on the 26th, and then we'll look at some beginnings of a survey. I think, you know, and the only other, I guess, I'll just take 5 minutes, then we can end early. But I was just thinking, in terms of the working with other committees, there's different ways to go. We could sort of like keep meeting and talking, and then, you know, what usually happens in town, and I would say is marginally effective, is convening, you know, other committees to come to a joint meeting. I know the select board would have all boards meetings, and they were attended to various successes or not, but you don't get a lot of penetration in that regard. So like we could just sort of tap specific committees as they come up, you know, so like we're talking about doing workshops. So Marianne's not really a committee, but we could, you know, she's a department in town. You know, if we're looking at the rain gardens, well, it would make sense to talk to the highway department or to the Concom, you know, so we could do it as it emerges. There's different approaches, you know, and then there's this whole, like, we lead an effort and we invite people. So I don't know, is any of those strike people better or worse? Should we just sort of?
I like the idea that, we start inviting other people in the other committees to kind of plant the seeds, because there's so much.
But with the focus,
What's that?
but with a focus.
Yeah, I mean, even, yeah,
A particular person for a particular committee for a particular reason.
Or, the other thing that just struck me is, we could actually, it would make sense to maybe ask committees, sort of like how we're surveying the community.
mhm,
Because if you ask the Concom, what's the big issues? I know, Miriam would say stormwater, and the interaction with the highway department. And if you asked, I don't know who else would make sense. The fire department might, well, I mean, in terms of climate, I know on the MVP report, the fire department was concerned about, they use ponds strategically located around town to get the water if they're going to put out a fire. And over the course of time, those are going to be more, drier more often. So like if we actually asked, it would be a way of gathering information. But Nate, did you raise your hand? Oh, someone did on that side of the screen. But, okay, well, we don't have to solve it now. I'm just trying to figure out, like, it seems like that's one of those things we should just continue to think about, how we engage other committees, both for survival, but also I think to sort of infuse their thinking with these issues,
mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, okay. Anything else you want to talk about?
We probably should have a motion to accept last minutes. Zoe.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
I didn't-
Motion.
I didn't
What?
see them.
You didn't see them?
Were they sent?
Yeah, she
Oh,
sent.
a while
a
ago.
while back.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, Zoe.
Yeah.
They were good. I motion to approve them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Gal, you.
I second.
Oh, yeah, you were
Okay.
at the meeting.
I
too.
failed. I'm sorry. My bad.
Yeah. So, okay. So just, I think for Nate and Zoe, so the process for minutes is you move to approve in your second, and then there's discussion. So we could discuss them if there's edits, whatever. I had a question, which is like, I know that, I mean, I think Zoe did a great job. I sent back some edits. And so for our process, what I've experienced on other committees is that if there's small edits, one could discuss them during the meeting, or we could just send them back to whoever wrote them. And then that person can take or leave whatever people think and resend it out based on feedback. So we can sort of see the edited version, which this way we don't have to talk about it as much during the meeting,
Right.
but so it looks like there
I
are some
can do
nods.
that.
Yeah, so if you send it out, then we can just vote on it next time. We'll sort of say, okay, this is the edited version.
Well, am I the only one that didn't respond?
I don't know who responded. I mean, the appropriate thing is just to respond directly to Zoe, so we don't
Right.
collectively do that.
Okay.
So only Zoe knows who responded.
Yeah, I got some responses. I think Miriam gave me a couple of edits, and I think that's it.
Right.
Okay,
I don't need to impede the process here. Go ahead. and-
well, I don't think we're gonna, I mean, we could just vote to accept them now.
Yeah,
But-
I didn't know we were supposed to feedback. I mean, I looked at them. and they looked-
We don't have to. It's just a matter of if we were to make changes, like, that if Miriam made changes and Zoe incorporated them, it would be different from what we saw. So then what we'd be approving is either the original ones, or we'd have to discuss the edits. So that's sort of the benefit of all of us seeing the edited version is then it's easy enough to approve.
Or
Yeah,
you could accommodate those edits and send it out again.
that's
So
what I'm
that-
suggesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so we come to the meeting fully appraised of what the current status of the minutes are.
Yeah, that was my
Good way to-
suggestion.
Good way to do it. Yeah.
Okay. So Zoe, if you, Nate,
Well, I was just gonna ask if we should establish like a set cadence for that process. I mean, if we're meeting every 2 weeks and that gives a couple of days for the first version of the minutes to come out, people have a couple of days to respond, and then before the next meeting, that revised version goes out so that people can come to that next meeting. Okay, Just making
Yeah.
sure I had it right in my own head.
Yeah, and,
Sounds
and
good.
yeah, and you just prompt people, say, I need my feedback, the feedback by, so it doesn't trip you up. But so Zoe, in this case, if you just send us that out, we'll approve it on the 26th and we'll go from there.
Sounds
So, great. Yeah, minutes is always the challenge of these meetings. I mean, and, but what, anything else you all want to talk about before we adjourn?
I would just say on the minutes thing, it's great if committees don't end up spending a lot of time talking about the last minutes. So this is a very good way. This is a very efficient proposal for, initial, everyone sending in. Yeah, so I love it.
Yeah, cool. And you just reminded me of one quick thing I wanted to say. I wanted to appreciate your guys' patience with me about the open meeting law reminders. So
Oh, I have a question about that.
yeah, go for it.
With the open meeting law, like, I know I'm on this committee, so if I go to another committee, am I not supposed to make comments? I notice like different people on different committees and commissions don't generally enter into conversation outside of there.
Oh, no, so if you're on this committee and you go to another committee's meeting, you're
Mhm.
totally free to talk. The issue is that the intent is that open meeting laws so that we don't do business and deliberate amongst ourselves outside of a public meeting. So, but if you're, the only thing that would happen is oftentimes this isn't necessary, but if you introduce yourself and say, I'm on the Energy and Climate, Action Committee, just sort of saying, I'm not speaking for the committee. Because
Mm.
sometimes you can have people go to, like I was at the select board meeting tonight, and I was representing the planning board on a particular thing. So they told me to go and speak on their behalf. But if I went as Michael, I would, just make sure that I'm not speaking for the planning board kind of thing. So that's the only part of that dance. And I would, the other part with just the work groups. I mean, I think, what Nate, you did was great, which is, you did your research and you sent it out to all of us. And so we have the information ahead of time.
Right.
Because I think some committees, in my experience, there's a sense of I can't share it until the meeting, but then you can't really have a good conversation because you haven't seen it, you haven't thought about it. So, sending it out, and as long as we're not commenting on it, but we're ruminating on it, we hold the conversation to the meeting. I think it's a good process because we get to ruminate and bring our thoughtfulness, but we're not breaking the law.
Love it.
Right. And the article or the link that I shared with you, Michael, I got like a couple of hours ago, so I wasn't sure, share it, not share it, but I hope you'll share it or.
I already did. Everyone's got it. It's in their inbox. Cool. Well, someone want to move to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do a roll call because we're supposed to. So Leslie.
Aye.
Okay, Zoe,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
Gail,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Cool. Great, wonderful second meeting, you guthis
Great
is
meeting.
this is like my favorite committee.
Oh my God, you've got too many committees then.
No, this is just fun. It's nice
yeah.
to talk. Okay, well, have a great rest of the night.
You too.
Talk to you later.
Bye, y'all.
Good night.